Hi! Today, I'm going to tell you the story of one of the most famous fairy tales of all time, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Have you heard of it? This magical story is full of kindness, adventure, and a little bit of magic. So, get comfy and let's begin. Before we dive into the story, let's learn a little about who first told this tale. Snow White comes from a collection of fairy tales written by the Brothers Grimm. That's right, there were two brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. They were born in Germany more than 200 years ago and loved collecting old stories from people all around the world. They wrote down these stories so that children like you could enjoy them forever. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is one of their most famous tales, and today, it's a beloved story all over the world. The story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a beautiful princess named Snow White. She had the fairest skin, as white as fresh snow, lips as red as the most beautiful roses, and hair as black as a raven's feathers. Everyone who saw her thought she was the loveliest princess in the land. But what made her truly special was her kind heart. Snow White was always gentle, caring, and loving to everyone around her. However, not everyone was happy about Snow White's beauty and kindness. Her stepmother, the queen, was very vain and obsessed with being the most beautiful woman in the kingdom. The queen had a magic mirror that she would ask every day. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And every time, the mirror would reply, "You, O Queen, are the fairest of them all." But one day, when the queen asked the mirror, it gave a different answer. "Snow White is the fairest of them all." The queen was shocked and furious. How could Snow White be more beautiful than her? Her heart filled with jealousy and anger, and she could not bear the thought of being second to anyone. The queen decided she needed to get rid of Snow White, so she called for her huntsman. She ordered him to take Snow White deep into the forest and, well, she had a very bad plan for her. "Make sure she never returns," the queen commanded. The huntsman took Snow White into the dark, spooky forest. But when it came time to harm her, he couldn't do it. Snow White was too kind and innocent, and he just couldn't follow the queen's wicked orders. So, he told Snow White to run far away into the woods and never return to the castle. He warned her that the queen would stop at nothing to destroy her. Poor Snow White! She was scared and alone, lost in the huge forest. The trees seemed to whisper, and the animals watched her curiously. But soon, the forest creatures, deer, birds, and rabbits came to her side to comfort her and show her the way. As they guided her deeper into the woods, Snow White came upon a little cottage. This wasn't an ordinary cottage. Everything inside was tiny. The chairs, the table, even the beds were small, just the right size for someone half her height. Snow White was so tired from her long journey that she couldn't help but lie down and fall fast asleep on one of the tiny beds. What Snow White didn't know was that this cottage belonged to seven kind and hard-working little men, the Seven Dwarfs. They worked all day in the mines, digging for jewels and precious stones. Their names were Dog, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, and Dopey. Each dwarf had his own unique personality. When the dwarfs came home from a long day of work, they were shocked to find a beautiful girl asleep in their beds. At first, they were confused. Who was this stranger? Was she a princess? But when Snow White woke up, she told them her sad story about how her wicked stepmother, the queen, wanted to harm her. The dwarfs immediately felt sorry for her and invited her to stay with them. "You can stay here and be safe," they said. "But beware of the queen. She will not stop until she finds you." Snow White agreed, and she was so happy to help them with the housework. She cooked, cleaned, and sang cheerful songs while they worked in the mines. The cottage became a happy place filled with laughter and joy. Snow White and the dwarfs became like family. However, back at the castle, the wicked queen still believed that Snow White had been taken care of. One day, she asked her magic mirror again. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" To her horror, the mirror replied, "Snow White, who lives with the 7 dwarfs, is still the fairest of them all." The queen was furious. She knew Snow White was still alive, and she decided to take matters into her own hands. Using her dark magic, she disguised herself as an old, bent-over woman with wrinkles, warts, and a cackling voice. She looked nothing like the beautiful but wicked queen. Then, she created a poisoned apple. It looked shiny and delicious, but one bite would cause Snow White to fall into a deep, death-like sleep. Disguised as a poor old woman, the queen traveled to the dwarf's cottage. She knocked on the door while the dwarfs were away. Snow White, always kind and trusting, opened the door and saw the old woman holding a basket of bright, shiny apples. "Would you like to try one of my delicious apples, dear?" the old woman asked, offering Snow White the most perfect apple from the basket. Snow White, not knowing the apple was poisoned, took a bite. As soon as she did, she fell to the ground, her eyes closing as she sank into a deep sleep. When the dwarfs returned home, they were devastated to find Snow White lying on the floor, not moving. They knew it must have been the wicked queen's doing. The dwarfs tried everything to wake her, but nothing worked. Heartbroken, they placed her in a beautiful glass coffin in the forest, where they could always watch over her. Time passed, and one day, a handsome prince came riding through the forest. He had heard tales of the beautiful Snow White and her kind heart. When he saw her lying in the glass coffin, he was overcome with sorrow. The prince leaned down and gently kissed her, and as if by magic, Snow White's eyes fluttered open. The dwarfs were overjoyed, and Snow White was finally free from the queen's evil spell. The prince asked Snow White to marry him, and she happily agreed. The wedding was a grand celebration, and Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after. And as for the wicked queen, well, she was never seen or heard from again. Wasn't that a wonderful adventure? Snow White's kindness and the love of her friends helped her overcome even the darkest times. Remember, being kind and brave, just like Snow White, can lead to a happy ending. Thanks for joining me today. If you love this fairy tale, don't forget to like and subscribe for more magical stories. See you next time, kids. Bye-bye.